Hello, my friend. I'm Charles Brock. Thanks for joining me. Shaping a sculptured rocker so that it looks like it's in motion even when it's standing still is fun and exciting. In this companion DVD, I'll identify the lines and contours for you to make, the tools to use, and the way to use them to make your heirloom rocker a creation of beauty. Let's get started. Let's see, I'll get my rasp and microplanes and some scrapers. Got to sharpen them up, and my grinder. This is gonna be fun.
One of my favorite families of sculpting tools are rasp. And these rasps are a ruse. They're made in France. And this is a combi rasp here. It has a lighter grit on one side and is more coarse with a heavier grit or heavier teeth on the other side. It's for flat work or long work where you want to make a nice gentle curve. This is the first rasp that I bought. That was an Aru. It's a cabinet maker's rasp. It's curved in the front, flat on the back, if you will, has teeth on the sides. It's a number 10 grit rasp, and it's my favorite. You can work small with it, you can work big with it. You can do a lot very quickly with this rasp, and you'll see me use that quite a bit in this video. This is a modeler's rasp for detail work. Curved on one side, flat on the other. It's a 13 grit, I believe. They're just great to work with. I'm going to show you a family of sculpting tools here called Microplanes. Microplanes do a tremendous job. They don't cost a lot, and they replace things like the large rasp and some of the smaller rasp. You can cut in any direction. You don't have to worry about the grain orientation, and you can use the radius of the tool to make the radius that you desire. For final shaping, there's nothing better than a scraper. And I have a whole assortment here, and they all have their own little task. For major scraping, for really great shaping, I like just a big, heavy scraper. Then for more refined, you get smaller. And if you don't want to buy or use these little small scrapers with all the little radiuses, you can do a very nice job with a gooseneck scraper. You have different radiuses all over the scraper. The power tool family for sculpting your rocker is kind of small. First thing that I ever got was for the big stuff, the seat and so forth, was a Makita grinder, an angle grinder, and an attachment, which is a carbide wheel that you just attach right to the spindle, and you can remove a lot of material very fast and in a very controlled way. It just throws it everywhere though. So since I work inside so much, I've really changed. Now I use a Festool RES 115 with 24 grit. I mean, this is some tough paper, very coarse. It removes a lot of material very quickly, not quite as quickly as the auto body grinder with the carbide wheel, but because of this shroud and because of being able to attach it to a Festool dust extractor or dust collector, it picks up most of the fine dust. And what it doesn't pick up is thrown out, hits these brushes on the shroud, and falls down in a nice little controlled pile that you can pick up. And you can work kind of small with this and very carefully, and you can make those big sweeping movements that remove so much material at one time. It kind of gives you a feeling of power. This is a flex shaft die grinder. It's got a motor, a flexible shaft, and a handpiece. It holds burrs of various shapes with 1/4-inch shanks. They come in different grits. I've got a speed control that I use that allows me just to set the speed and go with it. You can get a foot control for the speed, but as you'll see, it would be very hard for me to chase it around while I'm sculpting a chair. This is a great way to carve the details in your chair. Starting with the front of the seat, first thing we see is this is very rounded. Now don't be caught leaving this square in front. This needs to be rounded over. From the front view, it kind of invites you into the seat. And then you've got a joint here where the leg and the seat come together, and the more curved you can make that, the better. It's a real booger to get into this area right here and try to sand it. So lately I've been making the joint a little more curved, and you'll see later on as I do one for you that will actually leave a larger radius right there with one of the flex shaft burrs. It works so well for that. And of course, this is very rounded all the way up the leg until you get to the pedestal here. And it's still rounded, but it starts to flare out. This is the pedestal area. And you're going to fare this in after you have glued the arm to the leg. And moving on down the leg, of course it's rounded all the way down and then flows nicely into a foot. And you can make actually a nice hard or a soft line right on the front of that foot. It kind of divides it into the side and then the back side of the rocker skid at the foot. A line there is very, very good. All of this along the outside of the rocker sled is rounded over, top and bottom. That allows you to round the rocker transitions into the back leg and just leave it nicely rounded. Here, here, and on the inside and the outside of the back leg. Now let's look at the seat. The seat is rounded over a lot. And I've removed a lot of material underneath this seat. You want to thin it out just a little bit, or actually a lot, so that when you're looking at the rocker from up above the seat, the way you usually will look at the rocker, it looks thinner on the side and doesn't look so clunky. Sometimes less is just more. And then, of course, when you get to this corner here, you really don't want it to be a corner. You would like for it to flow in a nice radius that's not so tight, because this is hard to sand. Now, this is not just square up to a corner here. it rolls back this way and actually forms kind of a line all the way across here. But it rolls to that line, this being kind of the high point right here in the middle. Rounded that way and rounded up to that line. Very important. And as you come up the back, that line along the edge of the seat continues. It continues on into the arm, and this surface is actually rounded away from that line. All the way up, rounded in the back. The outside back of the leg is rounded. Now, before we move on up the back leg, let's look at the arm. It has a line, a hard line, becomes even harder, almost a knife edge, as it moves along here. And the surface is rounded on the outside, just a little bit. You know, I tell you, there aren't many flat areas on this chair. And of course, it's rounded up to that knife edge. Don't leave a big clunky side view out here. Now, I am, and you'll see later on when I carve one of these arms, I'm leaving this a little fuller right in this area, leaving it just a little bit fuller. And so, I don't know, it's just the development of the chair. It's developing a chair every day that's more and more my chair, I guess. And even this is rounded here, and rounded a lot right in there. As we move on up the back leg, we have this line here. It goes, at times it's pretty hard, and at times it softens a little bit, but you see how it's just picking up my white pencil lead? That's because there is actually a little hard edge in most places right there. Now, the opposite is happening in the back. It's rounded over. And so you have a lot of rounding over that you can do there, all the way up. And it's actually rounded a little bit toward that hard line. It's not just square at that line. Very few places are square. It's just slightly relieved even down here to that point. It's very important. Now, the rocker skids, or sleds rather, they're continued to be rounded over, top and bottom, on the outside. You can round them over with a router bit if you like, and then refine them with a rasp. And don't forget to take the bandsaw and cut a nice profile for the back of your rocker. Because back here, you really want to show off those laminations. In this case, we have some maple against some ebony and against some walnut as the primary wood. And this gives us a chance to show them off as we carve down through those laminations. The front of the seat and the front view of the chair, of course, is very important. It does give most of the invitation to the possible sitter. And the front of this chair has some, I think, some very inviting features. One is starting at this corner It's very open, and you have a very hard and then a knife's edge along this bottom line. And the chair is very thin here. I've actually removed about 3/16 of an inch on the bottom here to round it up slightly to this line. And at the top, I've rounded it over to provide comfort in the thigh cutout areas. Keep that pressure off of your nerve there while you're sitting. And here we have a nice, I call it a linen fold. I don't think that's really the right term, but what we have is the pommel is standing proud, and we've kind of undercut it to make it stand proud. More and more you'll want to lower the pommel so it won't, it'll make it more comfortable to sit for a long period of time, because you can move your legs a lot easier if the pommel is not so proud. But that line, of course, needs to be reconciled with the other side, which is always fun to do. You have to use your eyes and anything you can to make one side look like the other. It's very important to round over this hard line. See how it comes up like this and over like that? It's actually, if you look at it from the right position, it's an S curve. It's one of those flattened S curves that really makes the chair so beautiful. They're all over the chair. It was one of the things that Sam did so wonderfully, was use of the flattened S curve. Well, anyway, this is a flattened S curve, and then coming away from that, it's rounded. It's rounded into this, not a real tight radius there, pretty open radius, and then right down the leg. Now, there is a line right here. It's a soft line. And it gets harder as it comes down into, finish up the joint flowing into the seat. But it's on the inside of the arm. There's this little cove here, and it flattens and comes all the way down. It's a nice detail. Here's the cove, and it flattens, flows down the arm, and it causes this soft line that turns a little bit to a hard line there and flows out into the lines of the seat. The flat that flows out from underneath the arm comes down and flows into the seat. And this is a nice little cove that I'll show you how to make. And it brings it together and helps to form that monolithic look that we desire in this type chair. And in the back leg, it does the similar thing. There's almost one side of the leg and then the other. Now this is slightly rounded this way and that way, but it flows down into the seat, makes a nice radius that flows into the seat itself, and does the same thing in the back here. With this kind of being a dividing line that becomes a softer and softer line and kind of disappears. Now as we move on up the chair, we're going to see how the arm joints with the back leg stem. This is the back leg arm stem. And it's rounded over as it approaches that area. And it comes from a point where it's rounded almost to a knife edge right here. Almost a knife edge right along this line here. But then it becomes more rounded and flows into a return into the back leg. Well, more and more, I'm doing away with this material that's kind of hanging down here and making a more of a circular return. And I'm doing just a nice little arc up the back leg. This is all rounded over. All rounded over. All the way up. The inside of the back leg is rounded over. And it starts at this point forming a flow or a sweep into the headrest. And a little line starts popping out right there, a little hard line. And it flows all the way across and is actually becomes more and more of a knife edge. But it's rounded down to that knife edge all along the bottom profile of the headrest. And of course, this is not really flat here. This area is kind of where you would aim for your head to sit. And of course, even taller people, their head might sit this high. A chair seems to fit people from about 5'2" to 6'3", 6'3" with no problem at all. But this actually has a roll back that way to form another knife edge along this back edge. It rolls back, as you can see, and then it rolls this way. It's not tremendous, but it's enough to have a flat surface, but one that has some movement to it. And along the leg, we're finally kind of rolling from a higher area along the leg toward the middle. It kind of makes an invitation here with this part being the lowest and having the center spindle. And of course, the ear along the top is just an extension of that hard line all the way up here. The 7 spindles provide a lot of the flow, a lot of the organic look that makes the chair just come alive and makes it so beautiful. All the shoulders need to align across the bottom of the chair. You can either have them form the same smile as the Coopered seat, the little smile that the Coopered seat has, or they can all form a parallel line with the floor. But in looking closely at those shoulders, they are made by a line that runs down each side of the front of the spindle. It's a soft line that turns to a hard line, like so many of these, and it's rounded. It has a crown in front all the way down until it becomes round as a tenon fitting into the 1/2-inch mortise. And then across the top of the spindle, it's rounded over. It's crowned from a center line that's in the middle. It's rounded over. That relieves the number of points that are pressing on the back all the way up. But then this becomes more and more flat. And helps to form a hard line that comes down and makes the shoulders of the upper part of the spindle. Out of the set of 7 spindles, there are 2 of them that are the same length, the 1 and the 7 and the 2 and the 6, so forth and so on. They're the same length. The number 4 spindle is the only one that's going to be so short. Now I say this because of those differences, they each have to be tapered to give that nice tapered look into the 3/8 inch size of the tenon that goes into the headrest. And so you can taper them, if you'd like, in sets based on length. But the last thing you want is a big chunky mass that all of a sudden disappears like a pencil point into the headrest up here. Now let's look at the back of the spindles. Down here at the base, it's very, very round. The back of the spindle is very, very round. Round all the way up to make a hard line on the outside of each one of those spindles. So you will be rounding this over considerably all the way up, and even coming out of these shoulders, what appears to be possibly a hard line softens, and we just round all the way around to the front. Now you do have an option of making this kind of flat on the back if you'd like up here, but down below it needs to be more rounded. And then, of course, it disappears into the headrest. Now, the headrest is rounded all the way over. Notice, all the way under to that hard line. All the way under. And you've already drilled the holes, and so it makes it look like the spindle is entering a curved area. And that looks so good, nice, and gives it a nice organic look. This is rounded over all the way. Some of the chairs where people kind of stopped short right here, I think did just that. They stopped short of giving themselves that beautiful rounded look. Now, the return from the arm is going to form a line that's going to move up the back of the chair. It's going to continue all the way up. Sometimes it'll be kind of hard, and sometimes it'll be kind of soft. More soft in this area and more hard up here. But this is a definite line, very graceful line all the way up that moves into the ears. And to get that, you'll need to remove some material away from that line, forming a cove, if you will. This cove is real important because that cove and this rounding makes the back just pop out to be such a beautiful surface. Now, it's a little flat right in here, but it, just like the front, it rounds down to that point before it rounds off so hard to go underneath the headrest and make that knife's edge along here. Got a knife's edge at the top, and then not quite so much of a knife's edge on the bottom. All right, the back of the seat, it rolls down to make a hard edge along here. But it does roll. It doesn't come out just flat. It rolls down to there, and it rolls up to that edge too, with this point being the highest part of that little crown there. And of course, it's very rounded underneath. Remove a lot of material here. I think it gives the chair a lighter look, and really just kind of sets it off. It looks very nice to remove a lot of material in this area and kind of cut in right in here, kind of cut in and take some of that out, and that gives you a nice little S-curve almost out here, in another flattened S-curve. They're all over the chair, and round all the way underneath the bottom leg under the seat. You'll also end up making another line, another flat on the inside of this leg here, and you'll round to that flat. At the horn or at the ears, still haven't decided what to call it, you're going to make a nice little cove. This is such a neat little area right here. You're just going to dig in and make a cove. It makes a nice hard line pop out all the way around. And of course, flows on down the chair. Don't forget to remove a little bit of material, kind of rounding up to that knife's edge on the front. And in here, I've really cut a cove all the way down the middle for about, I guess, at least 6-7 inches back to the middle of board number 3. And that allowed me to remove some material to make that nice little linen fold, as I call it. Round over all of your joints, your seat board joints, round those over and make it flow a little bit. And don't leave it boxy at all. And underneath the leg, it needs to flow out just like it does on top. Make sure that you make this flat on the inside of the front leg below the seat, just like you did above the seat into the arm, and it gives you a way to kind of flow into a cove which will nicely blend into the bottom of your seat. You can also take that flat and run it all the way out to form kind of a soft line here on the inside of the rocker. Now, I make a little crown on the inside. I have a soft or a hard line, whichever it is, on the bottom edge and on the top edge, and on the inside I just make a crown. I don't round it over, even though a crown does have a little bit of rounding down to that edge or to that line.
The seat's front has to smile at you. Let's get started. It needs to be rounded over on top down to a line made by a slightly rounded up bottom edge. This can be accomplished with a number of tools, but they all start by making a flat along both of the front thigh relief radiuses. With a grinder, just move it at a 45-degree angle to the square edge of the seat front, sweeping toward the pommel from the outer edge. Move the tool in a radius as if you were drawing the shape you would want to make. It will work. A large rasp will define and clean up the seat front lines. Use sweeping strokes to make a sweeping radius. Try your best to make a gentle curve from the outside edge to the pommel. Next, use a tool that has a shape built in like a curved microplane, or the round burr on a die grinder, to carve a nice open radius on the outside of the cutout. The microplane works the long grain, while the grinder burr works across the grain. Use a large rasp to slightly round the front edge of the seat bottom up to the knife edge. Start the rounding at least 3/8 of an inch from the edge. Undercut the pommel with your choice of tools. There's a lot to remove. I like to first make a flat on the bottom of the point. Then remove material in a triangle at least 6 inches back from the point. Most of the material comes off at the front as the excavation tapers out toward the back of the seat bottom on the center line. This is a nice detail. It gives a lot of lift to the seat front. Let's get to work on the front leg before we attach it to the seat. It is so much easier to work the leg this way. Clamp it in a vise. Now I'm using a V-block to make clamping easier. The outside of the front leg has a lot of stock that needs to be removed to round it over and to form a cove that flows into the sides of the seat. With the leg off, you can remove a lot of material easily without having to move the whole chair around, but it can be accomplished with the leg on the chair as well. Make sure you mark your joints as shown in the DVD in the legged up position. Start by making a flat on the outside of the leg at the joint. Then remove the excess material on the side of each leg with the grinder by rolling the edge of the grinder's pad in the shape of the cove you want to make. Stay on the outside of the marked lines for now. Easy does it. I'm starting to cut into the inside of the front leg to make the small radius above and below the chair seat. Again, I marked the leg to seat joint with a colored pencil while it was legged up. Keep at least 1/16 of an inch away from this line. I'm using an assortment of tools, and first a sawing action to make the radius. Then I'm continuing a small flat above and below the seat joint area of the front leg. As you see, any of these tools will work well. You will have more control with a hand tool until you become experienced. Don't take off too much because it is a pain to put wood back on. In general, start removing what you won't need on the inside of the leg. Marking out for sculpting the arm is very important. I would suggest that you mark out both of your arms for the 45-degree flat now, as they can be a real bear to reconcile. Remember, you must always reconcile to the smallest element of a set of parts. Use the grinder to make a very long, deep flat along the inside of the arm. This flat needs to go all the way down to the line that will sweep from the front of the arm almost to the bottom inside and finally sweeping up the back leg. Use a large rasp to clean up the flat and finally round it over. Mark a red center line on top of the arm and a white line from which to round away to the outside. This will define the surface with a nice crown rounding hard to the inside and gently from the center to the outside. The red lines are showing you the results of the rounding over that is about to take place underneath the arm. Now, make a flat and round it over with a grinder or large rasp or both. Finally, rounding the outside of the underarm. This is starting to look good, real good. Mark out the arm to front leg area in a grid of sorts. This gives you something to aim at as you remove each part of the X'd out grid. Now go back to the top of the arm and shape it with your rasp using long strokes. Turn it over and smooth the bottom. You know, there are really no flat areas on the arm. They are all crowned or rounded over. They're moving or rolling toward adjacent surfaces. Start working closer to the front leg stem, noting that you want to leave enough material on the bottom of the arm to ferret into the leg top. The die grinder or curved edge microplane will do this very nicely. Always keep a nice open radius around the arm to front leg joint. This will make a nice pedestal on which the arm will appear to sit. Detail the underside and front of the arm. nothing like sculpting with hand tools. Scrapers, both large and small, are very important in fine-tuning these surfaces. Don't forget that flat that runs from the inside of the arm down the inside of the leg. And clean up the front of the arm, finally making a nice little crown rolling away from the front. Let's carve a headrest. Go to the Rocker Studio on my website under Patterns and download and trace the headrest ingrain cross-section on your prepared headrest. It's a roadmap for what to keep and what to take away. The red line I'm drawing on the bottom of the headrest locates the hard line to which I will round over the front and back. Finding the right orientation of the work to the tool and securing the work is a constant challenge. There is no substitute for a good bench and vise. The grinder makes fast work of removing this material. Of course, you can use an aggressive rasp or microplane for more control. Hand tools sometimes take longer, but you'll have more control and you will learn to be a sculptor. Always start with a facet or a flat when you round over. First, flatten the corner, then work long strokes along the bottom profile. Long strokes are the key to flowing lines. Notice I'm rounding right over the spindle mortises. This gives the headrest and curved spindles a kind of organic look instead of what you'd get with a flat headrest bottom for spindle entry. Use the preponderance of flats concept every time you round over. If you make a series of flats at slightly different angles next to one another, eventually you can round them over just like connecting the dots. With practice, you will be able to take off a little or a lot with just the right amount of pressure. That's pretty good. information on sculpting, check my Sculptor's Corner on the website, charlesbrockchairmaker.com. Clean it all up with a large rasp with long strokes to round over the front. And that's your Uncle Bob. I'm not sure that I know what that means at all. And what if you don't have an Uncle Bob? Well, enough of that. Let's get back to sculpting. To round over the front top of the headrest to a hard knife edge, make a nice sweeping line, starting with the outside corner you just made. The line should flow to a point about 3/8 of an inch from the back of the headrest at the center line. Now work on the top back. Remember, you are making a hard line. You can reconcile one side to the other by using your three best tools, and they are sight, touch, and persistence. Just keep working at getting the stock in the "it feels right" position for sculpting. First, remove the remaining extra wood on the side of each leg so the joint is flat with the side of the seat. You can do it with a grinder if you have built up some control. A microplane or a small rasp will also work. Mark and round over the outside edge of the front seat. This will actually give you more room to attack the front side of the leg to seat joint. Use a nice open radius. Remove the square edge and round it over. Move on down the leg and up the leg. Anywhere there is material that isn't in your mind's picture of the finished leg, remove it. This will be very helpful because it will give you a better look at the shape of the seat to leg joint as it develops. Round the front corner of the seat some more and remove some of the excess on the seat bottom at the joint. You really want to make this flow. Now it's time to actually cut into the leg and the seat to make a cove that sweeps from the side of the leg onto the side of the seat. If you do it correctly the first time, you may feel as if you've taken off too much, but go for it. You must remove a lot of material. Notice how I used this tool to saw into the joint. This leaves material above the cove. The cove is complete when there is a smooth, unbroken transition between the leg and seat at the joint. Take your time. It is harder to do with hand tools like a small round microplane, but it is also harder to mess it up with hand tools. I've switched from the 1/2 inch round ball burr to a 3/4 inch bullnose burr. I'm working to remove all the material around the cove. First, remove more on the front corner of the seat and continue to round the area. Round over the front underside of the seat as well. Make a nice sweeping radius. Then move to the leg and take out the excess stock all around the cove. Make sure the leg is nicely rounded. A block plane or microplane will flatten the high spots and identify the low spots. Mark the low spots, and of course you must work the high spots down to the low ones. Blend everything in with any tool that works. If you like the results you're getting, then just keep doing it. If you don't, then try it another way. You can work small with a big tool, but you can't work big with a small one. Point on the seat front corner down a little with a rasp. It's looking good. Start a cove on the inside of the leg, creating a fairly sharp radius from the inside of the leg to the top of the seat. Cut into the leg and just keep using that sawing technique until you can't feel the transition from one surface to the other. It's all right if you barely cut into the top of the seat at the joint. You can sand it flush later. You will notice a wing starting to appear on each side of the leg at the top and bottom of the cove. This creates part of the flow that will be reduced, but will be part of a soft line that runs from the arm to the seat front at the corner. You should have enough experience now so that you can push that line with a rasp by working it on one side of the line or the other. There's a lot of power in pushing that line. Enjoy it. Now let's make a soft line at the junctures of the crown flat that runs on the inside of the arm to the top of the seat. Draw the lines using a colored pencil. The area in between is not really flat. It has a slight crown. Now make a cove on the back side of the seat to leg joint the same way you did on the front. Remove the excess stock under the leg joint and just smooth it in. Remove the proud part of the tenon at the seat to back leg joint. Clean up the round over on the seat bottom as it flows from the front leg and round over the lower part of the back leg down to the last 2 inches, and leave those untouched for now. Now go back and finish smoothing and detailing the front of the seat at the leg joint, the front leg joint itself, and the side of the seat all the way to the back leg. Use a modeler's rasp or microplanes and scrapers. Scrapers are always good. Now for the back leg to seat joint. Use that same sawing motion on the back leg at the seat joint until you don't feel the transition in the joint anymore. Work on both sides of the leg. Then remove the material above the cove with a die grinder and a sanding sleeve as shown. Or try using a light touch with your grinder. Use the grinder on the back of the seat to to remove the proud portion of the seat tenon and to fair a nice curve on the back of the seat. Make sure to keep it symmetrical on each side of the seat center line. A large rasp is perfect for blending all the major parts. This work really pays off. Extend the lower inside line of the arm so that it sweeps up toward the back edge of the back leg. I call this the arm return. Material must be removed under this line. Remove some of it in this position. Shape the rest with the chair turned over. Start shaping above the return by smoothing the leg to arm transition. Make a flat on the inside corner of the joint and round it over. You may also do this very well with a large rasp. Leave a sweeping line by working above and below it for now. Later on, you can tweak it smooth with a rasp and a scraper. Do not completely round over the outside of the arm here. A flat will later be made as a nice detail. With the chair on its side, blend the underside of the joint, rounding it into the back leg. Don't make the radius too tight. Finish shaping the flat on the outside back of the arm. Clean it all up with a scraper. Let's work on the return itself. You must remove material under the sweeping line on the inside of the leg to get enough wood standing proud to get under it and shape the sweep. It doesn't matter whether you cut in under the line to form the sweep first or remove the material on the inside of the leg. Just don't remove your line. Clean up everything with a scraper. Now let's work on the front leg to arm joint and make a nice pedestal for the arm to sit on. I do this without having the arm glued on at this point. A screw and a dowel hold it nicely for shaping. As you remove stock from the underside of the arm, occasionally stop and grip it like you would if you were sitting in the chair and just see how it feels. I also work the top front of the arm here just to be able to visualize everything. When you're making two parts or sides alike, what I call reconciling, use measurements off of known points, like your seat center line or your seat to leg joinery. Those will help you when you reconcile. Using a 5/8 inch ball or bullnose burr, I finish cutting in toward the front leg stem. rocking soon. Just keep going. Finish shaping the front of the arm by slightly rolling and rounding the outside top of the arm's front. There it is. I hope you enjoyed it, because you have one more to do. Well, I love it. Shape the upper back leg with a large rasp. The cross section would be football shaped, with the hard lines on the inside back or the outside front. The inside front and outside back are rounded over. Use a scraper to clean up and shape everything as you go. Remember, there are no flats. Remember, the best tool in your box is persistence. Draw an extension of the line that runs along the lower inside of the arm. It sweeps into the back leg and up the inside back of the leg as a hard line. The line continues straight up the leg toward the ears. This will leave some back leg material to the inside of the line. I am making a cove here to provide a transition from the back leg to the headrest. Use a sawing action on the inside of the line with a bull nose or ball burr to make the cove. Be careful, if you go too deep, you may discover a screw. Check where your screws are in the headrest before you start the cove. This can also be achieved with a large round microplane. Cut across the back leg to headrest joint until it is smooth and makes a nice uninterrupted sweep. smooth the transition between the ear and the headrest. I like to use my grinder to round over the outside of the leg at the headrest. It also works well to fair the sweep in the front. Then shape and clean up with your tool of choice. Work every detail. Remember, let's make your lines pop. Use a scraper to provide the final shape. Notice how smooth it is all becoming. Start cutting a cove in the ears. This cove actually runs into the cove on the back of the leg. A round burr makes quick work of this, but I have shaped many with a microplane and a rasp. Give the ear a good outside shape as well. A few details and voila! that came with your instructional bundle has some great segments showing the sculpting of the spindles and the rocker sleds. When your rocker's finished, don't forget to email me a few pictures. Send them to rockandchairman@gmail.com. Doggone it!